Did you know that the very first computer made by Apple did not include a monitor, keyboard, or casing? Yep, you heard it right. It was only a simple assembled naked circuit board. But it's very different today since Apple computers feature some of the best designed and futuristic-looking computers made from the world's most premium materials. The brains behind the establishment was Steve Jobs, Gary Wozniak, and Ronald Gerald Wayne. The tech giant as we know it came literally from nothing. This was the case when Apple started, since these three guys sold some of their valuables just to raise capital to create Apple. Jobs sold his Volkswagen, while Wozniak sold his HP Scientific calculator to fund the startup. And that's not all. Tag along as we go down memory lane of how one of the world's biggest tech companies came to be. Without further ado, let's get into it. Founded by Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, and Ronald Gerald Wayne, this trio was specialized in three very distinct fields. However, despite the trio being experienced in the three different fields, together they made the perfect combination to build a multi-billion-dollar company. Jobs was a veteran in the marketing sector, and Wozniak was a tech guru. For Ronald, he could provide administrative oversight and documentation for the newly formed company. Merely 2 weeks after the company was formed, Ronald found interest elsewhere. He decided to sell his 10% share of Apple back to the duo of Jobs and Wozniak, and he left. The price? $800. 1 year later, he accepted a final payment of $1,500 US. This final payment was to act as security for any potential future claim against Apple. His departure left Jobs and Wozniak running the company. However, the two were still very strong, and their skills complemented each other. Today, the 10% share that Ronald sold would be worth almost $73 billion 40 years later. And now that we're left with the two in the picture, you might wonder how they met. Well, here's how. Ronald was the one responsible for making the first Apple logo. His sketch entailed an image of Isaac Newton, who was standing next to a tree with an apple. On the drawing was also the name of the company and a phrase that read, "A mind always traveling through strange seas of thought." For a long time, many people speculated a lot about the name of the company. On the other hand, Jobs went forward to give a simple explanation of the origin of the name. He said that he liked apples, and that's why he named the company so. Once, you probably made new friends through other friends, and that was the case for 16-year-old Jobs and 21-year-old Wozniak. The two were still in school when they met. Jobs was still in high school, while Wozniak was attending UCLA Berkeley in the early 70s, when the duo was introduced by a mutual friend, Bill Fernandez. Knowing his friends, Fernandez knew the two would click right away and become friends, since Jobs and Wozniak showed interest in electronics and practical jokes. After meeting, the two became acquainted. At one moment, when Jobs was working at Atari, he sought Wozniak's help to work on a circuit board for a project for the game Breakout. The pair's first business partnership came merely a year after they met. This was when Wozniak began building blue boxes, which facilitated the two to make long-distance calls. Their new project was a success, and their new device hit the market hard. They were able to drive sales, and thanks to Jobs' skills, they sold some 200 blue boxes for $150 each. The two got profits, which they split between themselves. This venture was the very first Apple device. By 1975, Jobs and Wozniak had withdrawn from their respective colleges, and in that same year, they started attending the Homebrew Computer Club meetings. From these meetings, Wozniak found inspiration from new processors like the Altair 8800 and the IMSAI to build his microprocessor into his video terminal. This finally enabled him to have a complete computer. Wozniak preferred the 6800 made by Motorola to his computer, but they were out of his price range. So later on in 1976, the release of 6502 chips from MOS Technology, going for only $20, was more than good news for Wozniak. The same year, he was able to complete the machine he was working on, later referred to as the famous Apple I. The machine held a lot of commercial potential.
I hand-wired the entire bottom, soldered it all together personally, because there was no way to afford a technician, and That was an Apple I, the first Apple I computer ever.
Initially, Wozniak wanted to share the machine's blueprints to the public for free, but Jobs insisted otherwise. Jobs came up with the idea of building the machines and selling them in a venture that would make them a fortune. He insisted on making bare printed circuit boards for the computer. Wozniak offered the design of his latest invention to HP, where he was working at the time. However, he was only disappointed not once or twice, but 5 times. Jobs managed to convince Wozniak to get into business together and make their own company. To accumulate capital for the new company, the two sold their belongings, Jobs selling his Volkswagen and Wozniak his scientific calculator. On January 3, 1977, Apple Computer Inc. was incorporated. During this period, the company was showered with funding, something they were in great need of. A multimillionaire named Mike Markkula gained a lot of interest in Apple I, and he was left with no option but to fund the company to make more devices. Doing this, he became the 3rd employee of the company and gained himself a third of the company's total share. Mike thought that Jobs was still too young and irresponsible to run the company, hence he suggested Michael Scott to be the first president and CEO of the young tech company. At that time, the computers were exponentially taking off. It was also during this period that the developments for the Apple II started. In 1979, Apple made a breakthrough, and they introduced the very first spreadsheet and calculator app, the VisiCalc. The tool quickly became a must-have for businesses, which helped the company make a ton of sales. Jobs wanted to have these devices look as stylish as possible, and this was a call for their fair share of disappointment in 1980. To do this, he insisted on removing vents and fans on the devices. This brought around malfunctions on the device due to overheating. Unfortunately, the faulty devices were released at the worst time possible. IBM released their first personal PCs, which put them ahead of Apple in sales. Despite Apple having sales drop, in the early 1980s, the company dared to start working on not one but 2 new personal computers, namely the Lisa and the Macintosh. After making the 2 new devices, the Lisa was more technologically advanced but pricey. It discouraged consumers, which led to low sales for that particular product. On the other hand, the Macintosh was thriving and did well in terms of sales. Thanks to its sleek design and faster processing speed, it found its way into schools and offices. The success of Macintosh was also greatly influenced by the iconic 1984 commercial that was televised during the Super Bowl.
24th, Apple Computer will introduce Macintosh. And you'll see why 1984 won't be like 1984.
In 1983, John Sculley was hired as the second CEO after Mark Markkula wanted to retire. Jobs roped Sculley into the company with his legendary question, "Do you want to sell sugared water for the rest of your life? Or do you want to come with me and change the world?" This won him over, and John joined Apple. However, shortly after John joined the company, tension started growing between Jobs and Sculley after Macintosh just couldn't beat IBM. This led to Jobs stepping down from Apple's management after the disagreement on the company's vision. Shortly after, Jobs quit and founded another company called Next for making advanced working stations. His departure was followed by that of his partner, Wozniak, who sold most of his shares. After Jobs left, the board decided to implement the famous 55 or die policy. In other words, the company wanted to make at least 55% profit per machine they sold. They intended to hike the prices of current devices so they would get higher profit and make fewer sales in a shorter time. However, this policy did not last and it backfired. Compared to its counterparts like IBM and Microsoft, Apple was lagging. Having made a mess, the company needed a plan to get itself back on the tracks. The roller coaster of changes to make the company great again started rolling. A lot was done, and finally, a decision to bring Jobs back was reached in 1997. Apple decided to buy Next Computer for $429 million and gave Jobs back his executive powers. Immediately after he got into office, Jobs was able to secure the release of Microsoft Office on Macintosh computers.
Well, we'll be selling our software independently, so the key thing is that Apple gets a lot of consistent standard machines out there quickly.
He also kicked off the design and making of some currently well-known devices such as the iMac, Apple laptops, and iBook. Apple managed to last and increase its sales until the mobile phone era. On January 9, 2007, the iPhone was launched by Jobs at the Macworld Expo. The news was received warmly as within 30 hours of release, more than 270,000 iPhones had been sold. 1 year later, the App Store was launched in July 2008. This store was designed to sell third-party applications for iPhone and iPod Touch. A month after the launch, more than 60 million applications had been sold to consumers. The platform also registered an average revenue of $1 million daily. All these figures led the company to dominate the industry, coming in third among the largest mobile handset suppliers in the world, and that's all thanks to the popularity coming with the first iPhone. 2 years later, the value of the company's share rose. In October of 2010, Apple shares hit $300.
Apple's are red, IBM's blue. If Mac's gonna be the third milestone, I need all of you.
In 2011, a decade and counting after his return, Jobs decided to retire from the management of Apple due to health issues. He was replaced by Tim Cook, who is still CEO today. Unfortunately, Jobs passed on the same year he retired on October 5, 2011 due to health complications. Finally, the curtains had closed, signaling the end of an era like no other for Apple. The company has continued to make an impact in the industry. The company never ceases to amaze its customers with groundbreaking technology and stylish devices. Apple has also garnered die-hard fans who wouldn't use any other device if it's not an Apple device. Well, that's how the Apple we know today came to be. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe and activate those notifications for more inspiring videos. Cheers.